Alright class, today we're diving deep into the key elements of physical exercise and sport performance, focusing on how the body moves and what systems are involved. To begin, we know that all movements during exercise are purposeful and require effective coordination of muscles and skeletal structures. These movements are powered by the forces generated in muscles, which act through the body's lever systems formed by the bones. Now, it's important to understand that these muscle contractions and movements are not random. They are controlled by the cerebral cortex, the area of the brain responsible for initiating voluntary movements. The cortex sends signals via the motor neurons of the peripheral nervous system to activate skeletal muscles, which in turn move the bones. But it's not just the muscles and nerves at play here. The cardiovascular and respiratory systems are working in tandem to deliver oxygen and nutrients to these active muscles while also removing carbon dioxide and other waste products. These systems are crucial because without efficient delivery of oxygen and removal of waste, muscle function would quickly deteriorate. Understanding the integration of these systems is critical for strength and conditioning professionals. To develop effective training programs for athletes, you need to grasp not only how muscles work, but also how the systems that support exercising muscles function. So today we're going to summarize the anatomy and functions of the musculoskeletal, neuromuscular, cardiovascular, and respiratory systems, all of which are essential for generating and maintaining muscle force and power. Let's start by exploring the musculoskeletal system. This system includes bones, joints, muscles, and tendons, all working together to enable the diverse range of human movements. Think of the bones and joints as the structural framework, while the muscles are the motors that produce movement. Interestingly, the muscles don't exert force directly on the ground or other object. Instead, they pull on the bones, causing rotation about joints, which then transmits force to the environment. It's key to remember that muscles can only pull, never push. Yet, through the body's lever systems, muscle pulling forces can result in either pushing or pulling motions against external objects, such as when you push a weight off the floor or pull a bar toward you during a row. Now, let's talk about the skeleton itself. The human body has approximately 206 bones, although this number can vary slightly. This lightweight yet strong structure provides leverage, support, and protection for the body. The skeleton is divided into two major parts. The axial skeleton, which includes the skull, vertebral column, ribs, and sternum, and the appendicular skeleton, which includes the bones of the shoulder girdle, arms, pelvic girdle, and legs. The joints of the skeleton are where bones meet and where movement occurs. We classify these joints based on their range of motion. Fibrous joints, such as the sutures in the skull, allow almost no movement, whereas cartilaginous joints, like those between vertebrae, allow for limited movement. However, when it comes to sports and exercise, the most important joints are the synovial joints, such as the elbow or knee, which allow for significant movement. These joints are unique because they have low friction and a large range of motion, which are critical for athletic performance. Synovial joints are lined with hyaline cartilage and surrounded by synovial fluid, which act as a lubricant, allowing the joint to move smoothly. We also categorize joints based on the number of axes around which movement occurs. Uniaxial joints, like the elbow, allow movement around only one axis, while biaxial joints, such as the wrist, allow movement around two axes. Finally, multi-axial joints like the shoulder and hip allow movement around all three axes, enabling movements in multiple directions. One important aspect of the musculoskeletal system in adults is how skeletal growth can be positively influenced by various factors, particularly muscle use. When subjected to heavy loads, such as during resistance training, bones increase in density and bone mineral content. If the body performs explosive movements or experiences high impact forces, we see similar adaptations. Some of the highest bone densities are seen in athletes who engage in activities like gymnastics, so where there is a combination of strength, power, and high impact landings. Bone adaptations are influenced by both the load applied and how frequently the skeleton is loaded, making regular and varied resistance training crucial for bone health. Now, let's move on to the skeletal musculature. This is the system of muscles that moves the skeleton. Each skeletal muscle is attached to bones at both ends, and these attachment points are critical for movement. Without these attachments, our muscles wouldn't be able to pull on bones and create the movements we perform every day. Each skeletal muscle is an organ in itself. It contains muscle tissue, connective tissue, nerves, and blood vessels. The entire muscle is surrounded by a connective tissue layer called the epimysium, which continues into the tendons at the ends of muscles. These tendons attach the muscle to the bone via the periosteum, a connective tissue that covers all bones. This means that when the muscle contracts, it pulls on the tendon, which then pulls on the bone, causing movement. Within each muscle fibers are grouped into bundles called fasciculi, which are surrounded by connective tissue called the perimysium. Each individual muscle fiber is surrounded by a thinner layer of the connective tissue called the endomysium. All these layers, epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium, are connected to the tendons, so the force generated in the muscle is efficiently transmitted to the bone. To make the muscles contract, signals from the nervous system must reach the muscle fibers. This occurs at the neuromuscular junction, the connection point between a motor neuron and the muscle fibers it controls. Each motor neuron can control hundreds or even thousands of muscle fibers, and together they form what we call a motor unit. When the motor neuron sends a signal, all the muscle fibers in that motor unit contract simultaneously. At the cellular level, muscle contraction is explained by the sliding filament theory. This theory states that muscle fibers contract when actin filaments slide inward over myosin filaments, shortening the muscle fiber. This action pulls the Z lines closer together and the muscle contracts. The more cross bridges that form between actin and myosin, the greater the force produced by the muscle. Finally, it's crucial to understand the role of calcium and ATP in muscle contraction. Calcium is released from the sarcoplasmic mesenchymal reticulum in the muscle cell and binds to troponin protein on the actin filament. This allows myosin to bind to actin and initiate contraction. ATP provides the energy for the myosin heads to release from the actin and reset for another contraction cycle. Without enough calcium or ATP, muscle contraction cannot continue.